That temptation can only be removed if we make ourselves so strong that nobody dare entertain any aggressive designs against us." Unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to take you through the rest of the day's proceedings of the integrated maneuver and firepower exercise. The overall context of the exercise has already been explained to you by Commander Tukor. Before proceeding further, let me first acquaint you with some important features on ground so as to allow you to track the activities of the day. Please observe just in front, across the deployed military equipment, you can see exercise Radul Barq, strike of thunder, written on the small ridge. This ridge represents the 12 o'clock direction, and the same will be our general line of observation for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, the direction of north is being indicated by the pointsman in front. Ladies and gentlemen, we are presently sitting on the northern tip of the Cholistan Desert. This area is part of the Khairpur Tamewali field firing ranges and is known as Kandewala Dhar. Khairpur Tamewali is a tehsil of Bahalpur district. Interestingly, Khairpur Tamewali was initially named Tanori after the tribe that once lived here. It was destroyed by the floods of Satluj River in the 18th century and was later re-established as Khairpur. The suffix of Tamewali was added in 1900 when a Britisher by the name of Tommy found a meteor in this area. That meteor is still available in a museum in London. With the passage of time, the town grew from Tamewali into Tamewali. For ease of orientation and comprehension, a few cities and towns around Khairpur Tamewali are being displayed on the screen in front. The city of Bahawalpur is 70 kilometers towards west. Melsi and Satluj River lie to the north at about 40 kilometers from our position. Hasilpur and Chishtiyan lie towards the northeast at about 40 kilometers and 55 kilometers respectively. Fort Abbas lies at the southeast of the stand at about 65 kilometers. And the Indo-Pak border lies 70 kilometers due south. Coming over to the firing lines of armor, please look towards your left. At about 200 meters from the stage, you can see a line of blue flags with a board of FL1, firing line 1. If you start moving right of firing line 1, you will see a line of red flags with the board indicating a firing line 2. Further right or east, you can see a line of grey flags with the board indicating firing line 3. Ladies and gentlemen, you can also see 4 Skyguard radars covered in camouflage nets standing immediately in front of this stage. Ahead of these radars at 100 meters from this stage are 8 Oerlikon guns with FM90 weapon systems deployed on both sides of the Oerlikon guns. Ladies and gentlemen, ahead of the Skyguard radar and Oerlikon gun, you can see black boards with M1, M2, M3, and M4 written in white. These boards indicate firing positions of air defense weapons and sniper detachments. Ladies and gentlemen, the target being engaged today are also located in the area in front. At approximately 1,000 meters from our own position, you can see a line of orange walls with a board to the right with TL1 written on it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is target line 1 and is depicting the forward edge of the enemy's delaying line. Behind the forward edge of the enemy's delaying line, you will be able to see a line of blue walls and a board with TL2 written, target line 2 depicting depth of enemy's delaying line. Further in depth, you'll be able to see white walls and derelict tanks with a board of TL3 indicating deeper enemy positions within the same delaying line. These enemy positions will be engaged by tanks coming over to the targets for artillery. Ladies and gentlemen, a few of the landmarks may be difficult to observe at the moment due to haze. However, these will become clearer as the day progresses. Ladies and gentlemen, the first line of artillery targets is immediately behind the line of orange walls and is depicted by black screens with white bases, having letters T1, T2, T3, and T6 written on them, up till T6. The second line of artillery targets is depicted by red screens, while the third line of artillery targets is depicted by green screens. Ladies and gentlemen, these artillery targets represent enemy positions which will be engaged by own artillery during the encounter battle. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look 12 o'clock of TL1 board on the skyline, you will be able to see a red screen with the H1 written at its base. If you start moving right of the screen, while remaining on the skyline, you will be able to see two more screens on the skyline with H2 and H3 written at their bases. These targets will be engaged by combat aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look ahead of the rightmost Oerlikon gun, that is to your quarter right, you will be able to see 8 large cloth panel targets, each with black circle in the center facing north. These are Air Force targets and will be utilized by PA for strafing. Ladies and gentlemen, participating in today's exercise is also the indigenously developed Buraq unarmed combat aerial vehicle, which will shortly enter the airspace from the left of the stage. Pakistan is amongst a handful of countries to have developed this technology and is constantly improving it. Buraq is loaded with the laser-guided Bark missiles, which have been operationally used against terrorists during Operation Zarb-e-Azb. The UCAV can operate up till a range of 200 kilometers from its base, while its missile range is up to 8 kilometers. The target being zoomed in onto the screens, and the live feed of Buraq UCAV visible on the other screen. Ladies and gentlemen, the UCAV has locked its target. The stability that you see in the screen indicates that the target has been locked. And you will shortly witness the target being engaged. The Buraq's target on ground is located 1 o'clock of the farthest strafing target, and is at a distance of 3,000 meters from our current position. Designation of the target has commenced. If you look at the farthest PF strafing target, plus of it is the Buraq UCAV target, display visible on the screens. The Buraq has fired. It has a flight time of approximately 25 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, Napoleon said, and I quote, "Never disturb the enemy when he's making a mistake," unquote. And that is an engagement. The Buraq successfully engages its target. Target visible on ground, plus of the strafing targets, visible destruction on the screens. Ladies and gentlemen, you can now hear the tanks approaching from the right of the stage. These are the leading elements speeding up towards their positions. The leading elements comprising Al-Khalid tanks will shortly become visible to the right of the stage. You can see a few derelict tanks deployed ahead of the farthest strafing target, or the leftmost strafing target. These leading elements will engage the derelict tanks located there. The Al-Khalid tanks operated by a crew of 3 with a 125mm gun. Ladies and gentlemen, while this maneuver will actually unfold on a much broader front on the battlefield, the distances for today's exercise have been kept reduced for ease of comprehension and visibility. Target engaged. First round kill. Ladies and gentlemen, the training of the Strike Corps is an ever-going process. The Corps has been out in the field for the last 3 months, during which time the units initially brushed up upon their individual skills and thereafter commenced integrated training. The Corps has been practicing all its operational tasks and activities, including crossing of water obstacle, break-in battle, breakout, advance to contact, etc., glimpses of which are visible in the albums placed in front of you. We will be showing you one of the aspects of training today, that's the encounter battle. It is pertinent to mention here that while the actual span of the encounter battle may be much shorter, that is not more than 40 to 45 minutes, however, the activities of today may take noticeably longer, since most actions, including firing of various weapons, will be carried out sequentially rather than concurrently, due to spatial and optical considerations. Target destroyed. It is also pertinent to mention that while you may witness a variety of weapons firing together, the employment of the battlefield will always remain subject to the dictates of the tactical situation on ground. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Own Air Force has been called in to engage enemy positions. My colleague, Flight Lieutenant Waleed, will take you through the rest of the proceedings.
ज़देबां के शाबनीमो कारम बज़मी चस्त सहरा अस्त के दरिया अस्त तहे बालो पर मस्त. Ladies and gentlemen, since the Air Force has the intrinsic ability to swiftly deliver lethal firepower with precision, the air power has been called upon in support of this aggressive maneuver. All the PF aircraft participating today are multi-role supersonic fighters. The complement comprises F-16 Block 52 Fighting Falcons, the Destiny of PF JF-17 Thunder, Mirage Rose 3 Zerards, and F-7PG Talons. Ladies and gentlemen, in the first attack, 4 F-7PG aircraft, being led by Wing Commander Amjad, will approach from your left at low level to avoid detection by enemy radars. They will pull up and position themselves for a dive attack and dispense heavy anti-tank and anti-personnel ammunition. You are about to see them attacking the white panels at 1 o'clock from your position. Ladies and gentlemen, let me apprise you that owing to small size and gray camouflage, the aircraft would be visible once in the dive. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also apprise you that they will engage the targets in the formation of two. The preceding formation will make its approach after the first has engaged the targets. Ladies and gentlemen, the aircraft would be approaching 40 seconds from now. Ladies and gentlemen, you can hear the thunder of F-7PGs. They are pulling up and they would be visible once in the dive. Ladies and gentlemen, now you can see the first aircraft is into dive for engaging its target. The second has also pulled up behind. Strength, agility, a huntsman's eye, and calculated recklessness, shattering the enemy line. What you all may appreciate is the value of time for a pilot who has to maneuver his aircraft and position it in the perfect regime of speed and dive angle to engage the target all within seconds. There goes the last aircraft of first formation, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, the second formation, JF-17 Thunder, led by Wing Commander Atif, is engaging the designated targets right now. You can see the second aircraft is into dive. Proud machine, sleek and powerful, built to fight and drop destruction, uprooting enemy spine with the remarkable amount of precise firepower. Ladies and gentlemen, shortly a third aircraft will be in dive, and here it comes. Take a good look at these air warriors, denying all the difficulties, overcoming the threat in the line of duty. They accomplish their objective. Ladies and gentlemen, the next attack comprises the workhorse of PF, a formation of 4 Mirage Rose-3 aircraft equipped with the latest night attack capabilities. The Zadars are running in for high-speed, low-level attack, penetrating enemies' defenses with surprise. Their objective is to neutralize enemies' command and control centers marked by orange flags behind Mount T1 and Mount T5. The aircraft will appear from your left rear and would be flying close to the ground. You may now look towards your front, ladies and gentlemen, where the Mirages are running in. The weapons have been released, and you see the explosions on the designated target. Ladies and gentlemen, the aircraft will break off towards left, and very shortly they will be followed by 2 more aircraft to take on remaining targets following the same path. Ladies and gentlemen, you may now look towards your left side in the same direction. The Mirages are now running in. There you see, ladies and gentlemen, both the targets have been neutralized and the Mirages break off. Ladies and gentlemen, next in the sequence is JF-17 Thunder, a marvel in achieving self-reliance through indigenization of our combat potential while staying abreast with modern technologies. This was the dream of Pakistan's visionary leadership a few years ago, and today you will witness realization of the dream in the form of 2 JF-17 Thunder aircraft led by Commodore Bilal. Their targets are enemy-hardened shelters and underground bunkers depicted by white mounds behind T2 and T5 around 2 kilometers away. Ladies and gentlemen, you may now concentrate towards your front. Where the JF-17s are diving in to release their weapons. Here they come, ladies and gentlemen. The aircraft have released their weapons. Ladies and gentlemen, the aircraft has the ability to deliver its weapon with pinpoint accuracy on a target as small as a window. And there you see, ladies and gentlemen, the nation's pride destroying the targets with precision engagement, employing 2,000-pounder high explosive bombs. Ladies and gentlemen, now comes the Fighting Falcon, the nightmare of enemy. This formation of 4 F-16 aircraft led by Wing Commander Tahir will be swapping in while maintaining 480 knots. They would conduct the next attack by engaging enemy-hardened shelters and underground bunkers depicted by a line of white mounds in front of you at a distance of approximately 1.5 kilometers. Few of these mounds are visible behind Mount T3 right now, while others are in the same alignment. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that while each aircraft is capable of carrying a payload of 24,000 pounds, enough to annihilate the area of about 2 by 2 kilometers, for today, the payload has been limited to 6,000 pounds in the form of 12 high-explosive 500-pounder bombs. There you see, ladies and gentlemen, a thing of orchestrated hell, a terrible symphony of light and flame. Ladies and gentlemen, the next two aircraft are now in dive, coming in hot for their own targets. Victory speedy and complete. Ladies and gentlemen, the F-16s have successfully engaged their targets and are now pulling up to exit the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed the swiftness and lethality of Pakistan Air Force. The coalition achieved through professional integration of PS firepower complements Pak Army's combat potential.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll draw your attention to your right, where the remaining squadron has taken up positions with the leading elements. As the Air Force moves out of the area after engaging the targets, you can see the remaining squadron taking up its position with the leading elements. The squadron grouped with ITVs or improvised tow vehicles and air defense elements. The squadron is a part of the leading battle group. Having once established contact with the enemy, it has now taken over the role of a fixing force. Its job to keep the enemy pinned down till the remaining force develops a maneuver to clear the enemy position. Ladies and gentlemen, combat aviation, being an integral part of the armored formation, will now fly in from the right, provide a dynamic base of fire, engage the enemy in front, and exit to our left. A flight of Cobra gunships and Z-10 helis will be appearing towards your right in a few moments. Presently, they are charging in towards their battle position and will only become visible once they have unmasked for the attack. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now draw your attention to the targets to be engaged by combat aviation. If you look in front at the board with TL1 written on it, behind that board at the skyline, you will see a red or orange screen with the figure H written at its bottom. This is the first combat aviation target, and the remaining two targets are towards its right if you keep on following the skyline, presently obscured slightly by the dust. There are two more targets for the combat aviation, which will shortly become clearer. Ladies and gentlemen, the helicopters participating in today's exercise belong to Army Aviation Combat Group, which has consistently remained employed in the recent past in Operation Zarb-e Azb and has been honored with a large number of gallantry awards. The thunderous sound of the incoming Cobras and Z-10s . The targets are the red screens on the skyline, the first one behind the board of TL1, the remaining two to their right, with the figure hotel written at the bottom. Close-up view available on the screens in front. And now, becoming visible to the right of the stage, the closer three are Cobra gunships and the farther two Z-10 attack helis. Missile fired and engaged target. Targets being engaged. Now the Zulus, the Z-10 attack helis will fire. PA-9 missiles with 6-kilometer range. The AH-1F modernized Cobra attack heli is Pakistan Army's dedicated aerial anti-tank platform, carrying 8 anti-tank tow missiles with a range of 3,750 meters, 76 rockets with an effective range of 6 kilometers, and 750 rounds of the 20mm Gatling cannon. The Zulu 10s equipped with 8 BA-9 missiles with an effective range of 6 kilometers. Target engaged. The cannons, 20mm Gatling cannons engaging target. Cannon with an accuracy of 3 feet at a range of 2 kilometers. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Valiant Airwolves are moving out of the battlefield at high speed. These combat pilots are battle hardened. The first 3 Cobras, followed by Z-10s. Bringing your attention back to the fixing force to the right. Ladies and gentlemen, the TOW heavy anti-tank weapon systems mounted on ITVs or improvised tow vehicles will now be engaging the enemy position from within the position of the fixing force. I would draw your attention to the mound with T5 written on it. If you look further ahead of T5, you will be able to see two white walls in the sky, slightly obscured by the dust. These are the targets which will be engaged by HATS at a range of 2,700 meters. Once launched, it will have a flight time of 14.5 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, just to draw your attention to the green balloons that you see in front. These are meteorological balloons being used to get the latest weather update essential for the accurate firing of the Oerlikon guns. The data from the balloons will be acquired by the Skyguard radars, and the HAT fires and see the impact within 14 seconds. And that is an impact. Target engaged. Second round fired. And target engaged. Slightly obscured by the smoke. The engagement by HAT, followed by the remaining fixing force. First round kill. Derelicts on fire. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be witnessing a number of activities today which involve the utilization of the airspace. For example, the flying of the different types of aircraft fighters, attack helicopters, UCAV, air defense weapons, and artillery guns. Such a large number of airspace users necessitates skillful airspace management, for which purpose we have an air support coordination cell operating at the back of the stage. It comprises of representatives of all airspace users who are constantly in touch with their headquarters, air bases, and civil aviation authorities, and very skillfully keep the airspace deconflicted. While you might not be able to see them in front, nevertheless, they are engaged in a meticulous and stressful job behind the scene. Fixing force engaging targets. Today's maneuver being manifested by 30th Cavalry Battle Group, being led by Lieutenant Colonel Azhar Sajjad Khan. Ladies and gentlemen, cavalry, and we have another engagement. Cavalry, the master of maneuver, mobility and firepower are such attributes that make this fighting arm the decisive one in war. Spearheading the advance, conducting a flanking maneuver, or delivering a nasty counter blow, all falls in the purview of the armored formations. All targets successfully engaged. Ladies and gentlemen, as earlier mentioned, while this maneuver will actually unfold on a much broader front on the battlefield, the distances for today's exercise have been kept reduced for ease of comprehension and visibility. Ladies and gentlemen, you will now witness air defense fire of infrared surface-to-air missiles, 35mm Oerlikon radar-controlled guns, and recently inducted FM-90 extended short-range air defense systems. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see 4 armored personnel carriers or APCs deployed in front at a distance of about 100 meters from the stage. Each APC is carrying 2 IR-SAM detachments who will shortly come out and engage their allotted targets. These APCs have been specifically designed and manufactured indigenously for these detachments. Today, these missiles will be fired on targets depicted by star shells, fired by artillery guns. Let me highlight that star shells provide a much smaller IR signature than an actual enemy aircraft. That is exactly why if a missile hits or even passes close to a target, it is considered a hit. The first detachments having taken their position, the guns have fired and the star shells becoming visible on the sky in front. 2 visible now, the 3rd visible, and we have the 4th visible. Detachments getting ready for engagement. The FN-6 IR-SAMs. And we have engagement. Another engagement. As highlighted, the star shell provides a much smaller IR signature than actually presented by an enemy aircraft. The first detachment going back, the 2nd detachment taking position. Ladies and gentlemen, air defense has a critical role to play in the battlefield by providing air defense umbrella to armor and mechanized elements while they are generating their maneuver. The 2nd detachment have taken their position, waiting for the targets. star shells fired will shortly become visible in front. The first one visible now, second, third, 3 star shells visible, the fourth also now visible. Missile launched and engaged. And successful engagements. IR-SAMs having engaged their targets, the detachments falling back to the position. Ladies and gentlemen, after the IR-SAM fire, now you will witness a fire of 35mm Oerlikon gun systems. In a short while, a remotely controlled target system will enter the airspace from your left. It is an indigenously developed target used for practice firing of air defense weapons. It may be noted that this target is 17 times smaller than an actual target. Hence, hitting such a small size target, having almost negligible radar signature, is extremely difficult and requires expertise of the crew. The target now becoming visible to the left. Oerlikon guns following the target. The 35mm Oerlikon capable of engaging targets at 4 kilometers with a rate of fire of 1100 rounds per minute. The guns are hooked up with Skyguard radars with the range of 17 kilometers. Oerlikons hooked up to Skyguard radars. Oerlikon with a range of 4 kilometers, the Skyguard with a range of 17. Guns following the target. A successful engagement. A target 17 times smaller than actual engaged. Respected guests, today is another historic moment for Army Air Defense, since FM-90 air defense weapon systems are also participating in this exercise for the first time. The induction of M90 and LY-80 LOMADs in Army Air Defense is manifestation of special focus of Chief of the Army Staff on enhancing combat potential of Army Air Defense. A recent induction of this weapon system is another milestone in the time-tested Pak-China friendship. The FM-90 weapon system has the capability to engage fighter aircraft at a range of 12 kilometers and helicopters at 15 kilometers. Besides this, FM-90 weapon system can also target UAVs and air-to-surface missiles fired by enemy aircraft. The system has an elaborate capability of electronic countermeasures under jamming situations. The missile has a proximity fuse which detonates the warhead once the missile approaches the target. The LY-80 LOMADs with a range of 40 kilometers are also arriving in Pakistan next month. All measures to absorb this high-tech weapon system, including training at China, have already been undertaken to fully operationalize LY-80 LOMAD on arrival. Respected guests, now in a few minutes, a fire of FM-90 weapon system shall be conducted on a rocket-propelled target system, S-200W, having a speed of 150 meters per second. The S-200W target system will approach FM-90 position from a distance of 20 kilometers. The FM-90 system comprises of the search and command vehicle and the fire and guidance vehicle. Two fire and guidance vehicles are presently visible to you, one to the left and the other to the right of the Olicon guns. You will shortly be listening to the wireless communication of the search vehicle, the firing vehicle and the controller. During these transmissions, the search vehicle will be Shaheen, while the firing vehicle will be Babar and Tipu. Ladies and gentlemen, the search vehicle can simultaneously track 12 targets from a distance of 30 kilometers at a height of up to 8 kilometers. The firing vehicle can also track a target for 25 kilometers. Today, the target system is approaching from our immediate front. The left firing vehicle will fire, and the target will approach us from the direction of the board with M4 written on it. Firing vehicle on the left will engage the target approaching from our front, generally from the direction where the board M4 is placed, plus of that board.
Shaheen and Babar, com check.
Shaheen loud and clear.
Babar loud and clear.
Getting ready.
Shaheen, acquire the target and confirm.
Shaheen, target acquired, confirm.
The target has been acquired.
Shaheen, send target designation to Babar.
Shaheen, target designation sent.
Babar, target designation received and stably tracking the target. Babar, confirm target parameters. Babar, target is flying at a velocity of 120 meters per second at an altitude of 1000 meters and has reached at 20 kilometers.
The firing vehicle has now informed target parameters. Target approaching at 120 meters per second, altitude 1000 meters, Distance 20 kilometers.
Babar, turn turret total aiming.
Babar, turret total aiming confirmed.
The firing vehicle has aimed.
Shaheen, send fire authorization to Babar. Shaheen, fire authorization sent.
Copy that.
Fire authorization given.
Babar, confirm gyro start.
Babar, gyro start confirmed.
The firing vehicle on the left, aiming, getting ready to engage the target.
Babar, you are clear to engage the target in figure 30 seconds. I repeat, figure 30 seconds.
Babar, copied. Target in range. 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 Allahu Akbar!
And an engagement. Target engaged at 6 kilometers. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to recapitulate the prevailing tactical situation on ground for your better comprehension. The present situation is that the leading squadron of the leading regiment group, while advancing on its axis of advance, has encountered enemy positions. The squadron is now acting as the fixing force. The remaining regimental group will now find a way to develop its maneuver. You can't describe the moral lift when in the fight your spirit vary. Here's above the hostile fire of your own artillery. Ladies and gentlemen, the artillery preparatory bombardment preceding the armored maneuver started jolting Kandewala Dhar. A total of 84 guns firing at the target, pulverizing the enemy from rear to front. The artillery fire as part of the preparatory bombardment will systematically soften up the enemy before any maneuver is undertaken. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be soon witnessing the lethality of the multi-barrel rocket launchers firing from your right side, aimed at targets up to 7 kilometers deep today. The MBRLs have a range of 20 kilometers, each system with 30 barrels, each rocket with a dispersion zone of 50 meters, and a battery comprising 4 MBRLs can effectively cover an area of 400 by 600 meters. The guns participating today include the 155mm M198, self-propelled M109A2 and M109A5, 8-inch howitzers, and M110A2 howitzers. Also participating are the 122mm MBRLs and the 122mm D30 guns. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you can witness the assault elements occupying their position to the left of the stage in their forming a place. The leading battle group forming up to the left, getting ready for its final assault. Preparatory bombardment, keeping the enemy pinned. The assaulting battle group forming up to the left. Ladies and gentlemen, the diversity of weapons and firepower that you have witnessed today will be available to the ground commander as per the developing tactical situation. The fixing force, covering fire. Covering fire now being provided by artillery. The leading battle group, having formed up, will commence its assault shortly on the orders of the battle group commander.
Charlie 10, Allahu Akbar now.
And I draw your attention to the left. With that call, the battle group has been unleashed from its forming a place. T-80 UDs charging on to the enemy. Deeper targets being engaged. You can see the TATs charging towards the enemy position, followed close behind by APCs of 1 Frontier Force Regiment, grouped with the battle group. The battle group assaulting enemy positions, MBRLs engaging deeper targets. The assaulting battle group will reach the enemy's depth, dislocating him physically and psychologically. Accompanying mechanized infantry will clear bypassed pockets of resistance. The fixing force will initially keep the enemy pinned down and then shift fire to depth positions. Terminal air defense will be provided by affiliated air defense elements to keep enemy aircraft at bay. Artillery will continue to neutralize enemy positions in depth. The enemy will be enveloped, isolated, annihilated. The assault well into its last stages. Artillery shifted to deeper targets. Artillery engaging deeper targets. The battle group now launching its final assault onto the enemy delaying line. The TATs charging onto the enemy positions. Tanks will overrun enemy position. Having overrun the enemy position, they will quickly reorganize themselves to tackle enemy's counterattacks. The enemy might try to occupy the next line of defense in the rear, which will be denied to him by a deeper maneuver of mechanized columns and engagement by long-range weapons. Through the combination of firepower and maneuver, destruction of enemy will be ensured. Having overrun the objective, the assaulting tanks will shortly take up their reorganized positions and will prepare themselves for any eventual counterattack by the enemy. The assaulting battle group reaching its reorganized position. I would draw your attention to the fixing force at right. It will soon evict its present position and join the remaining reorganized battle group. The fixing force now rolling. Speeding up to join the battle group. The first three tanks closer to the stage, Al-Khalids, the farther ones, TATs. Following close behind are the elements of air defense. Providing an air defense umbrella to the reorganized force. It will be shortly visible once the dust settles down. And ladies and gentlemen, the fixing force is now rallying up in the center of the reorganization phase, taking the shape of a reserve. This force will be available to the ground commander either to beat back enemy counterattacks or to establish contact with the next dealing line as per the dictates of the evolving situation. The air defense APC is now becoming clearer. the battle group having reorganized. Ladies and gentlemen, self-propelled artillery guns ensure continuous and maximum fire support to the maneuvering force. Artillery keeps on leapfrogging and stays in range at each stage of the operation. You will shortly see a battery of M109A5 self-propelled guns move towards your right. These guns will move forward and occupy their gun positions by adopting independent occupation technique. These self-propelled guns will be followed closely behind by air defense weapon systems, which will provide an air defense umbrella. Closely following behind are the armored vehicle launching bridges, which ensure the mobility of this force by enabling it to cross minor opposition en route within minimum time. I will invite your attention now to the right of the stage, where shortly the artillery guns will become visible. The tanks now becoming visible as the dust settles, and the sound that you hear coming from the right, artillery battery moving forward to take its position, followed by elements of air defense and armored vehicle launching bridges. The guns now becoming visible, occupying their new position by adopting independent occupation technique. Battery of M109A5 SP guns, followed close behind by air defense elements. Followed by armored vehicle launching bridges or AVLBs. The AVLB now visible. चले मैं चलूं and you can now witness the AVLB rising, the bridge being laid within minutes. This AVLB enhances the mobility of the advancing force by enabling it to cross minor oppositions en route within minimum time. You can see how quickly the bridge is launched. And as the dust settles down, I would invite your attention to the front, where the orange and blue walls that you saw in the morning do not exist anymore, indicating that the enemy positions in the DL, or the delaying line, have been completely destroyed. The AVLBs being launched will be completed within the next few minutes. The encounter battle into its last stage. The F-16 fly past. Ladies and gentlemen, our great leader Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah once said, and I quote, "Don't forget spirit de corps, pride in your regiment, pride in the corps as a whole, and pride in and devotion to your country, Pakistan. Pakistan depends on you and puts her faith in you. As defenders of the country, be worthy of her. This army was built up and made its reputation due to the devotion and bravery of your fathers and grandfathers. Make up your minds to be worthy sons." Unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, with this we come to the end of today's integrated maneuver and firepower exercise. I would now request the Chief of Army Staff, General Raheel Sharif, Nishan-e-Imtiaz Military, to present a souvenir to the Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Mian Mohammad Nawaz Sharif. I would now request the Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Mian Mohammad Nawaz Sharif, to address this august gathering.